The chairperson of the Council of Legal Education, Professor Collins Odote, who looks very young, but let me inform you, or let you into a secret that is a very old man, having taught me in 2005. And partly responsible for my being here today. Because in 2005, when I wanted to join politics, I had to take a program called Political Leaders Development Program under the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and he was a consultant there. So he taught us in 2005 to do politics, which has led us to being here today. But we are very grateful to you, Professor, for what you've done and what you continue doing. The Chief Executive Officer of the Council of Legal Education, Professor Jack Mimali, the Chairperson and Chief Executive Officers of all regulatory authorities and bodies here present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good afternoon. Good afternoon again. I know it is almost time for lunch, so I'll be very, very brief. And want to start by just saying that I'm grateful for this invitation because I feel that I'm among friends. I've seen a lot of my friends here. Professor Sianya was my classmate. Dr. Alosa, who we were in the trenches together. And when I saw him downstairs, I just started missing what we used to do because we are doing something completely different. And many others that we've been in this space together. My only regret is that I wasn't here from the beginning. I'm sure that I've missed a lot, but I'll try and get the notes of what has taken place here so that we update ourselves. But ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to join you today for this important conference. Let me begin by thanking the Council for Legal Education, led by the chairperson, Professor Odote, and the Chief Executive Officer, Professor Mwimali, for extending this invitation to me. Most importantly, I want to thank the Council for organizing this conference. This conference is both critical and timely. It is critical because it has provided all of us with the opportunity to reflect on the landscape of legal education in Kenya. As we gather here today, the landscape of legal education and practice is not what it used to be years back. There have been changes and developments driven by technology and other emerging dynamics and opportunities such as regional integration and globalization. Contemporary issues like climate change have also created new openings and imposed fresh demands, not just on the legal practice, but legal education as a whole. It is befitting, therefore, that we have had the opportunity to gather here and to reflect on these issues so that we can chart a considered path forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to be here, not just as Cabinet Secretary for Education, but also as a practicing advocate. These two hats give me the opportunity to share my perspectives both as a policymaker in the education space and a legal professional who has watched the trajectory that the legal education and the profession has traveled over the years. As Cabinet Secretary for Education, I have to mention that one of the key matters that we are now dealing with as a sector is the reform of the education system. As you are all aware, we are now transitioning from the 844 system to the competency-based education system. Indeed, the pioneer cohort of this new system will join senior school this coming January 12th, and this group will start their tertiary education and training, including in legal education, by the year 2029. The new education and training system is focused on building and strengthening learners and trainees' competencies. We wish to shift from the education system that is theory-based and exam-driven to the one that is focused on holistic education and on imparting appropriate skills and competencies on the learner to prepare them for the life in the 21st century. And here I just wish to inform the team here from the universities, who I work with very closely, in both good and bad days, Professor, that the competency-based education students, the cohort that is going to join the university in 2029, they are not your normal students that you know. And we've also warned the senior school teams that the students joining next year from the competency-based education, they are not the normal students that we know. They are not the students that will sit back and wait for you to tell them what the truth is, and that the lecturer or the teacher is not the only depository of what the truth is. They will challenge you. They'll demand that you engage them in various ways. They'll be ahead of you sometimes, and you have to be ready to have discussions and to debate with them. So it is important that as we move forward, as we look at what needs to be done, we start preparing early and understanding them. Even for those in leadership, or those who think that the Gen Z are a serious group, this new group that is coming, the Gen Z will look like Sunday school. They've been taught in a way that is almost 360 degrees. Even the way they sit in class, they sit perhaps the way you are sitting here, and I encourage you to visit some of those schools and see the way they are doing these things, so that the information is not coming from one place and moving into the other direction. So we need to be prepared early enough to be able to engage them in order for us to ensure that they are getting the very best and you are being able to do your very best. One of the primary duties that educators and regulators now have is to prepare adequately for the instructions and introduction of the competency-based education and training at the tertiary levels in readiness for the first cohort in 2029. We have to think carefully of how we will align legal education to the requirements of the competency-based education system. Essentially, our task is to reorient our legal education from the content-heavy to skills-based experiential and problem-solving pedagogy. There is need for emphasis on critical skills and competencies such as legal writing, advocacy, negotiation, decision-making, ethics, and digital literacy. This reorientation, ladies and gentlemen, will require a number of elements from legal education stakeholders. For example, to foster experiential learning and promote the acquisition of skills, we will require to build greater and stronger linkages to industry, the marketplace. There is need for our trainees to acquire the skills and competencies that the market actually demands. Mismatch between education and training on the one hand and the demands of industry on the other may make our graduates completely irrelevant and incapable of rising to the occasion. Going into the future, therefore, the legal education and training model has to be designed in a way that builds adequate synergy with industry. In the TVET sector, for example, we have promulgated the dual training policy and the recognition of prior learning policy, which establishes a framework for training both in academic institutions and in industry. Linkages with industry will not just help our students to acquire the skills that are on demand. Such linkages will also help academic institutions to determine the skills and competencies that the market requires at present and going into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, the other key aspect, which I have no doubt you've reflected upon, is the place of technology, given the advances in digital transformation, the emergence of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And here on machine learning, for instance, the KJSEA exams that we did just recently was machine marked. And that's where we are going to be able to release it this coming week. So there's a lot of technological advancement that is taking place in that space that you need to keep up with and reorient your programs to be able to tap into them. Technology has created a number of opportunities and raised challenges which we have to surmount by preparing our trainees appropriately. When, for example, I started legal practice over 30 years ago, the concept of virtual courts seemed a distant idea. I mean, it was not something that would consider. In fact, those who started practice those days, Professor Sianya, you remember, when we were applying to be, to be empaneled somewhere, would start by saying, we have a computer. We have one computer, or we have two computers. We have a department that, that was something that would be considered when you are being looked into whether you have capacity to handle certain matters. Now that is like a thing of the past. Currently, even filing those days without the physical stamp of a document that is stamped, you would not imagine that this document has been filed. Now that is not the case. So some of these things, when you look at them, and for those who are younger in this room, they look like a joke. But we had to do this because progression requires that you start from somewhere as you move forward. For example, we had to search, copious volumes of law reports to get authorities. Physical searching. Now you just go in there. If it is something to do with the titles you want, you just type and then something comes and you can look at the question. Within half an hour, you've sorted what you needed to do. So the fact that these things are now readily available at the press of a button, also indicates that progression, and in future, it is going to change. So you must be ready to see what's really likely to happen in another 10, 15 years, because now the technology is changing that much faster. I understand from my kids that in the West, something is being done to your glasses, that maybe all the data or information will be in your glasses, and you'll be able to say, I want to do something, and then it just comes through. So the legal education and training of today must therefore inculcate the correct digital competencies to prepare trainees for technology-driven world of work. Digitalization and digitization means that many sensitive documents, for example, and data are now online. The challenge, however, is that the increased exposure to cybercrime and the violation of data protection requirements becomes a reality. So it's something also that you have to start thinking about. How do you deal with that aspect, and how do you deal with the issues relating to the protection of data and privacy? Our education and training should therefore empower trainees with appropriate awareness and capacity for this new context. Another issue relates to increased cross-border trade and regional integration that have created demand and opportunities for cross-border practice. This is a time that we have to think of our legal education as being not just for Kenya, but for the region and beyond. We must prepare our graduates for practice beyond our borders, but also create an environment that is attractive to trainees from other jurisdictions. In other words, let us think of how we can seize the available opportunities to grow ourselves into a legal education and training hub. One of the challenges that I've thrown to the universities is some countries survive in the universities through fees or tuition that is by foreign students. Can we grow, our programs sufficiently to attract students from other jurisdictions so that we can sustain our universities, because the exchequer is growing that much lender as opposed to before. So it's things that we need to think about as we are dealing with issues to do with legal education. These developments, ladies and gentlemen, and emerging areas also mean new areas of legal education and training. The renewed focus on climate change and environmental governance means that the legal education has to be repurposed to equip trainees in the new areas. The same is the case for other areas like artificial intelligence, maritime and blue economy, data protection, extractives and natural resources, as well as regional integration. I will not purport here today to provide a comprehensive prognosis of legal education and training at this moment, partly because of time and largely because I am sure that you've robustly considered this and more issues in depth during your discussions, as the CEO here indicated. All I hope for is that the outcome of this conference will be a firm call for action so that together we can build a legal education ecosystem that is fit for purpose and future ready. The onus is on all of us as policymakers, as regulators, professional bodies, practitioners, and educators to revamp our system and ensure that it works for everybody. And we must face the challenges and get solutions. One of the issues that you will find in this country, now speaking as a government official, is that we have Kenyans who are so good, very sharp, very intelligent in stipulating the problems of the country. They are experts in indicating what the problems are. We have very few Kenyans who are getting into that space of creating solutions to those problems. And we need more of those. And we need your training and programs to be tilted towards producing graduates who are problem solvers, as opposed to people who are ready to define and describe the problems that we have. On behalf of the Ministry of Education and the Government of Kenya, I wish to assure you of our support to the extent necessary and possible in building an enabling policy and legal environment to implement the resolutions that you have arrived at in this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, with those many remarks, it is now my honor to declare this conference officially closed. Thank you for listening to me. Asanteni sana, Mungu awabariki.